Hey everybody, I'm Mark Mulholland. Welcome to the Upbeat, a podcast about hope and perseverance from Kelly's Angels. Continuing our conversation now with Trisha and Sena about the abduction of a 9-year-old girl from Moreau Lake State Park in upstate New York and how it has changed their lives and the lives of others who are listening and have tuned into their story. So Trisha, we had a conversation via email or text or something shortly after Charlotte was returned. Kelly's Angels is an organization in upstate New York which helps children who've lost a parent or sibling to cancer. We've expanded it to help families who are grieving in some way, families who have suffered loss, families who are dealing with current illness. So our board at the time was struck by what had happened to you and your family. So I reached out to you to say, we'd like to do something for you and your family to bring smiles to your faces, to let you forget about all you'd endured in the preceding days and weeks. We'd like to send you someplace, do something fun for you. And you replied to me and you said, we're okay right now. A lot of people have come forward and helped us. We feel okay right now. But here's what I suggest. This is what you said. How about whatever you were going to do to bring smiles to our faces, how about you do for the little girl who is the daughter of your child's attacker, abductor? And as I relate this story now, I still get goosebumps because talk about the power of empathy. You had just gone through this terrible, horrible, horrifying ordeal, and you were thinking not just about you and your family, but you were thinking about the fact that there is this other little girl out there whose father is a monster. So you said, how about you take the Kelly's Angels resources and help them? And I should tell you that I relayed that to our board, all volunteers, and they were blown away, as was I, that when you first told me that, I cried. But then I went to the school district and said, how do I get in touch with this guy's family? And they put me in touch, and it was a couple of days before Christmas. I drove over to her house, went inside, and said, this is not just from Kelly's Angels, but this is from the Sena family as well. And they started crying. But talk about the power of empathy. How was it that you were able to look beyond you and your family to say, hey, let's help this other family, his family?
Yeah, it wasn't hard. I think I want to be a good example to my children. And I feel like in these situations, we really have the opportunity and maybe even responsibility to be the light for others, to show that there is still kindness in the world. And even though we experienced something so horrific, I can't let that ruin my outlook on humanity, right? So like, I want to be a leader in that. And I felt it was really important to acknowledge her and understand that it's hard for her too. They are all at that age where they all have access to social media and phones, and I don't know how school was for her, but I felt heartbroken for her too, that must have. I'm just sure it was difficult for her, and she's a kid, and she didn't ask for this, nor does she deserve it. And I wanted to extend your kindness to her to show that we were thinking of her also.
Do you know if Charlotte knows that you did that?
She does not.
Will you tell her at some point?
Yeah. And my kids know her.
I think Charlotte would be proud of you for offering that, though. That's what
I do too. They know her. Yeah, they go to the same school, and they both have said she's very nice. And
we had heard she was not going to school.
Yeah.
Also, like the same time Charlotte was out of school. So was she. And same thing, like kids being mean and picking on kids type of situation, right? So I think it was like we were cognizant that she was really having a rough time too. And she's a victim also.
Right.
So
Maybe in a different manner, but, you know, she is as well. And I just couldn't imagine how she was feeling at that age. Such an impressionable age to have to go to school and, you know, see your parent on the news, and it just...
Yeah.
that must have been terrible.
So
It was hard. It was hard for me, and I'm not her parent.
No.
You know, it was...
I was moved by it, and my first conversation, I'd forgotten to tell you that I'd called her mom. So again, we're talking about the daughter of the man who is now in prison, who did this terrible thing to your daughter. I called her at your suggestion again to say that Trisha would like to extend the Kelly's Angels kindness to you. And through tears, she told me, will you please thank Trisha for me? Please thank Trisha for me. So I just wanted you to know that now. And again, I hope that someday Charlotte realizes how empathetic you were at a time when it would have been very easy to not be empathetic.
Yeah, but that's not a good example of how we want to be as a society, right? Like, we got to do better. And that's what I think all the time. We got to do better. We got to be better. And that's how I try to operate.
I appreciate that, and I can see that. Can you dispel some myths? Because there was this whole, and I think you've done this in one of your podcasts, but there was this whole idea that this was purely for money, and it was a ransom, and there was a ransom note, but that sounds like it was covering tracks.
That
covering
was just
tracks after.
I think he felt the heat on him, which makes me feel good because I was the heat maker, essentially. Like, you know, NBC Nightly News,
Stories
like
everywhere,
Inside Edition, whatever. So I think he felt the heat and had to figure out a way to, like... Backtrack. So I think that was the hasty kind of ransom note that was written.
It wasn't truly a ransom note then.
No.
It was just a...
There were no instructions on it. I mean, what kind of... You have to be an idiot to at least not just say, leave the money on the park bench. I don't know. I mean, like, what was the goal there? But we learned that he didn't want anybody to know what he was. That
predator.
The predator.
Correct.
So that's why I appreciate the sentencing that Judge Murphy, right? Murphy? Was amazing and really made it clear to everybody that was there and the media that was there that he is a sick, disgusting monster predator and should never be on the streets again. Because every deposition, every time they talked to him, he still insisted that he needed the money and he did it for money.
Charlotte was lying.
Yeah, that she was lying. We know the details, besides the evidence, we know the details of the case, and, you know, that's simply not true. And also he had cash before he did this. He bought that truck that he took her in cash a week before. So there were like details that the public didn't know that we were privy to. So that was part of the plea deal. Trisha really wanted him to have to admit what he was. And that was a non-negotiable part of this whole thing. If she was going to be on board essentially with a plea deal, that he had to admit why he did it, essentially.
Did he ever allocute to what he did? He did not.
No, he
All
never.
he said was he was guilty.
Yes.
And he had to in court, but he, right up until that moment, would not budge.
Or look anyone in the eye. So my husband made him look him in the eye in his impact statement, which I think everybody appreciated that moment where he had to just have some kind of accountability.
Sure.
Like, how do you do that and then have no accountability? And it's like, yes, you can say he's a sociopath and all these things, but it's like really wrapping your brain around what is in this person's mind.
You won't know.
You can't get
None of
inside
us
I can't,
will
and
know.
I don't know, but this is like what keeps me up at night, because I think I'm the type of person that I always see the good in people, like always, almost to a fault. So, and this is case where you just cannot do that. There is just no good in this person. So you're like, what made him this way, you know?
Yeah.
And then we, even being empathetic people, we would talk about like, we heard stories that his mother was abusive and everything like that towards him. So he probably grew up with this terrible abuse, and then that made him the monster he is. I mean, that's some kind of small way that I can, I guess, rationalize it as a human being.
And the other myth was that this was targeted. But you're certain that he was looking for any child that he could.
Certain. It is pure coincidence that our children go to school together, and at one point he lived very close to our house. But for those familiar with the case, he went to the state park we were in, did a couple laps. He went to a local theme park that's, you know, very close by, a shopping center.
Skidmore College.
A college, you know, so he was just looking for a child. He just happened to take mine. Like he just, and to be honest with you, 4 girls were riding their bike. When I think about it, like, would he have, because from my understanding, he saw them riding the bike. I know for a fact he did, because one of the girls identified him after the fact that we're riding the bikes. And then he went around and waited. So unfortunately, Charlotte went on her own, but it could have been 4 of them, and who knows what would have happened, because at that point, I don't know if he was getting restless and that's why he stopped and waited. I don't know.
I think he would have taken any one of them that he had the opportunity to, essentially.
I want to get to the fact that and I wasn't aware of this until I listened to your podcast, that people have shamed you. Right?
Yes.
I want to get to that, but I also want to ask,
100%.
if you don't mind telling me the circumstances. We'd reported, and I'd reported that she went on one more loop. You weren't thrilled about that, but you'd also taught her stranger danger. So when he first approached her, she said no.
No,
right?
Correct.
Tell me about that, Trisha.
So, first of all, with the bike riding thing, I took a lot of heat over it, which I can't even say I took heat, because they
Shielded
on
you from it.
TikTok, they were people don't watch your kids.
Like really shielded me from
it was like
a lot of that stuff. But our house rule is you ride in pairs. And there was 4 of them riding bikes. They all came back around and they said, we're tired. We don't want to go again. And Charlotte said, I'm just going again. Now, keep in mind, she's 9. I don't know about your children, but as much as I would like them to listen to every single thing.
Not every single thing.
They don't. No. So she decided to go around on her bike one more time. Now, again, our house rule is to ride in pairs. There's many times that we see kids riding alone. I mean, and that's okay. That's your family rule. Right. But we were in a state park, a safe place that I literally grew up in.
Sure.
She should have been able to ride her bike by herself, and I will stand by that. Just because that's my house rule doesn't mean that I felt the park was unsafe.
And you should stand by that. I mean, I can't imagine but I guess people did give you a hard time about that, which I find utterly ridiculous.
People are
very much so.
Oh, even that, me being the family spokesperson, and they would say the aunt must have had something to do with it because she's so calm on TV. And I'm like, please. I do this for a living. Yeah. Like, you learn, you shut your emotions off and you say what you have to say. And it was more important that people had an accurate description. The Amber Alert was incorrect in many spots. So in my mind, I'm like, I have to tell them that, this is what she's like. And if you see her walking at Walmart with a person who took her, like that type of thing, this is what I need to get out. And then I could go have my moment or whatever where I would, like everybody else, was like, just,
shut it down from whatever you need to do. So he approaches her.
Yes.
And she says no initially.
He said, can I have help? Something rolled under my seat. And she said, no, you're an adult. I think you can get it yourself. And he put his hands up or one, I don't know, but hands came up and he said, my hands are too big to get it. And so she got off her bike and reached in, and he threw her in the truck, shut the door, and told her not to get off the floor. And then he drove by our campsite because it was...
You had to.
He was right. Like, it was... Here's our campsite is on like a straightaway. It's just a little corner, and she was right there. So it was a 30-second walk to her bike. Not even. It was a 5-second walk to her bike. It was right there.
So he had gotten out of his truck when he approached her then?
I'm assuming she came up, and he must have gotten out of the car because the door was open and he pushed her in. I only know this because Charlotte has told me. I told the police I don't need or want to know anything unless I have to know, because it's nobody's place to tell me until Charlotte is ready to tell me. So I really only get pieces from her, and that was one thing that she had said. As a mom, I was in complete shock. I'm not an investigator, so I didn't say, was he parked? Did he get out? Were you walking your bike? I didn't even ask any questions, to be honest with you. I just said you did the right thing by telling him that he didn't need your help. Because we always say adults ask adults for help.
Yes.
They don't ask kids.
Yeah.
But she's a kind-hearted kid, and that was a thing that I said in my impact statement. What kind of monster takes advantage of a kid's kindness?
He's a monster.
Where do you hope? Where do you see Charlotte 5 or 6 years? Janae mentioned that maybe she's the advocate, maybe she's the therapist, maybe she is changing lives through her words years from now. Is that what you hope as well? You don't want to put any pressure on her, and I don't want to either. But
I do hope that she can continue what Janae and I do in the future, but I will say in 5 years, I hope she's just being a 15-year-old.
Yeah.
Right.
I hope she's playing softball and field hockey and worrying about what she's wearing to homecoming, and this is something that's in the rear view, and she's not thinking about it until she is ready to move forward and pursue something like this. I know it's not something that'll go away, but my true hope is that she's just being a 15-year-old kid.
Does she? Is she aware of? Has she heard your podcast? Has she? Do you shield her from that, or do you allow her to listen if she wants? Or keep in mind, she's a 10-year-old kid, so she's probably not particularly interested in it. But.
I don't offer to let her listen. She knows, like, what we talk about. Sometimes she'll say, did you do a podcast with Aunt Janae today? And I'll say, yeah, but it was boring stuff. We talked about laws, or something. I don't know that I would let her listen because I tend to get emotional. And when I get emotional, it makes her incredibly sad. When she was gone, she said the hardest part for her was thinking about how sad I was.
Really?
Yes. And she, like,
a 9-year-old girl to say that.
And she, as a matter of fact, for a long time, that was the only thing she even cried about, was it just made me sad because I knew you were probably really scared and worried about me. Oh. So when I don't want her to listen right now because I feel like it would make her so sad to hear
Your
sadness, because sometimes I do cry and get upset, and I think it would just be too hard for her, and I don't want to put that on her.
No, I don't blame you. Where is she in the birth order?
Middle.
She's the middle child. Mm-hmm. So they always say the middle child has to speak up to be heard.
Yeah.
Is that the case with Charlotte, or no? No, she doesn't have any trouble speaking up? No?
I have 3 rowdy girls.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they don't have any problem
I have to
speaking
prep my house for them coming over tomorrow.
None of them.
They'll tear it.
We have 5 girls between the 2 of us, so...
Kelly's Angels is grateful to have the generous support of businesses like Hoffman Car Wash, a family-owned and operated business that has been serving the Albany, New York area for close to 60 years. Hoffman Car Wash offers a variety of car wash services, including exterior washes, interior cleans, and detailing, Learn more at hoffmancarwash.com. The Sunmark Charitable Community Foundation that has expanded Sunmark Credit Union's abilities to support local charities. With zero administrative costs, 100% of every donation goes to helping those who need it. Learn more at sunmarkfcu.org/foundation. The Niemer Motor Group, a family-owned car dealership that has been serving New York's capital region for more than 50 years. They have 4 locations that sell Volkswagen, Ford, Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge, and Ram vehicles. Learn more at niemermotorgroup.com. Now back to my dad's interview on the Upbeat podcast.
How can people help? How can people, you guys are making changes. You're advocating for laws. The cameras are already installed. I was back up at the state park last week. They're already installed because there weren't cameras installed before,
Correct.
which would have aided the investigation, perhaps. Not more than perhaps, I think. How can people help? Where are you guys going, and how can people help?
Here's what we want. Here's our dream, that people that commit sex crimes against children have adequate, appropriate
Sentencing.
penalties and sentences. And being in the state of New York, and we were even told, we had a meeting with the governor's deputy secretary of public safety. I think that's his title. And he said, well, where the governor stands on this. She believes they can be reformed. We don't. We don't believe they can be reformed. The recidivism rate is like 30 to 40%, going up to 20 years. So sex offenders reoffend. I believe it's way more than 40%. But anyway, that's
especially those who offend against children.
Right, exactly. So these people, whatever they are, cannot be reformed. So we would like to see, and this is why I say this is like our dream, stricter penalties against them. Like, if you had totaled up all his charges and it had gone to trial and he was convicted, it would have been 111 years. Mm-hmm. That's what is appropriate for someone who does this. And it is our goal to keep them off the street because, like I said, they will reoffend. So we know in the state of New York, we have an uphill battle sort of with that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we're even going as far as to get involved in sex trafficking. There were 2 cases recently that they were both 14-year-old girls locally here in our area. They were confirmed trafficked. They were both brought to New York City. I talked to the moms every day, kind of helped them through it, guided them what to do. And then we all kind of collectively were like, what's being done for this? What's being done for trafficking? Like, you don't hear about this stuff, but this stuff is happening. They're meeting them online and then they're picking them up in the middle of the night and they're taking them. So these are like all the things that we feel like we can use this platform, we can use this voice and try to make better on it. But other states are doing much more extreme measures, and then you have Massachusetts, the guy who raped a child, I forget, I think it was like his 2nd or 3rd offense or something, got 6 months recently. Like, we read these things and this is where we're like, needs to change. This is what needs to change. So that if people want to help, they can write letters into the governor and say, this, you need to do something about this. You need to have stricter penalties against these people. They need to have appropriate sentences. Not 6 months, not reform, whatever you want to say. There is no reforming someone that does this.
I agree that you can't, there's something chemically wrong in their mind for people that choose to commit these types of crimes. But on a smaller scale, I think something that people can do at home is have hard conversations with their kiddos and educate themselves about the people that live around them. Mm-hmm. It's hard and it's uncomfortable, but it's absolutely necessary. There are times that we live in a very unsafe world. There's social media that impacts our kids greatly.
And you wouldn't think that, though, because we like to think here in upstate New York,
cupcakes and rainbows.
We're in a bubble, like a bubble or whatever. They're all around us.
Yeah.
These sex offenders are all around us in your neighborhood, my neighborhood. I mean, they have maps that you can look at online,
seen
find
that,
out where they
yeah.
are. They are everywhere. And more so, like, even it was a huge wake-up call when they were looking for Charlotte. And then someone called me from one of the media outlets, and they were like, oh, did you know that there's a hotel right up the road that's housing registered sex offenders? Like, this is a problem. And Trisha has the opportunity to talk to the governor. She talked to her the other day and everything. And we're trying, but it's like, it's tough. And we weren't even bringing politics into it. That was brought up to us, essentially. And we were like, okay, but it's not about politics. It's about protecting our children. Correct. And who's protecting our children? Like, if we can't rely on the government to do something, then who's doing it?
That's why those conversations you talk about are even more important.
And it really needs to start at home. And I never would have thought this, to your point, never would have thought in a million years this would have happened in a state park in upstate New York where everybody knows everybody. But it happened. And I did have those conversations with my kids, and something still happened because these types of predators do prey on the kindness of children. So you have to have those conversations at home. That's where we need to start. This big picture legislation, I understand that this is a huge uphill battle, but it's one I am absolutely willing to keep pushing because I feel very strongly about it. I think these predators need to be held accountable. We need to be kinder to the survivors. Like, there's so many things that I feel we can do better, but the immediate needs to start at home. And we need to start having those conversations with our kids. Get schools involved. My kids, last week, we had a gentleman come in, and he goes to every single grade, and they talk about, and it's all age appropriate from pre-K right up through into the high school. And it's, stranger danger right up through to social media impacts and how sex trafficking can occur through social media apps. So it's really age appropriate. So it's, every school should have
Did you arrange that?
Why isn't every school
Did you arrange that, Trisha?
No, I did not arrange that, but it started last year, at the end of the year. My two older children, I did not have participate because I felt it was too much for them, and they didn't this year either because they did it at the beginning of the year. They actually have already started. They started this week.
Good.
But every school should have a program like that. Like, maybe that's something we need to pursue. State funding. Is there state funding that allows for educators or someone to come into schools and educate children? Because you know what? Not everybody has superb parents. Not everybody has parents that are educated themselves. And just, there's, everything in the middle, right? So what can we do as a society to help our kids stay safe?
And as I've mentioned several times, this is a podcast about hope and perseverance. What hope do you think our listeners should take from the harrowing, terrible, horrifying experience that you had to deal with? Is there hope? Because you have to remind yourself that others need help.
Yep.
Do you feel hope?
I do feel hope because it's not an option. And that's just how I feel. There is no other option for me. If anybody has ever been through this type of situation, any of your listeners, I listened to a book called The Choice by Edith Edgar, and she is a Auschwitz survivor. And the whole book is about choice and how we perceive situations that we're put in to. And the beginning of her book, she talks about victimhood and what it is to be a victim and what victimhood is and how victimhood is you let that action define you. And right off the rip, I was very much into this book. But she goes through and talks about the choices we make.
You can choose to
you
wallow
can choose
in
to
it.
do better, right? So I would say, we always have to have that hope. When we lose hope, we're going to be in a very bad place, right? As a society, personal. So I just always have hope that tomorrow is going to be better than today, and so on and so forth. And I hope that people can take this situation and talk to their kids and, just be kinder to each other. Really, I mean, when we talk about his daughter, I wish people were kinder to her.
Yeah.
When people talked about me being a bad mom, I wish people were kinder to me. So it's, just, we don't know what the other person is going through mentally, emotionally, physically. And if we could just be a little kinder to each other, I think we'd be in a much better place.
Amen.
As a
Amen.
whole.
Yeah.
So true.
Anything either of you would like to add?
No, I just think just speaking about what people can do to help, we were told that the governor can do this, that she has the power. I've really gotten a good lesson in government, how government works, which I think that most people
What I
don't
didn't appreciate.
understand. I know.
There
right.
were some things
I know.
not a huge fan
But
of
it's true. But it's like learning, like, okay, she does have the power to, at least so if in our state, we can make it a little safer for our kids. And then we're planning
Beyond that.
to go,
Right.
I'm like, we'll be, like Legally Blonde or whatever on Capitol Hill, we'll be there in my like pink suit. Like I'm ready to take Capitol Hill.
Well,
I will not be wearing a pink suit.
Keep me informed,
You'll
though,
have your black
because
one
I'm happy to cover it too. Keep me informed as you guys keep keep moving forward.
January. So, but the legislation that Senator Tedesco is putting in is stuff that kind of should be in place already,
Right.
and we don't foresee an issue with that passing.
Tilting the scale of balance away from the offenders toward the people who have been offended.
This is right. So it's like really about the survivor and how they're treated through the process and afterwards, and not having having an advocate and all that stuff, which is stuff that we think
Really common sense.
Yeah.
stuff.
And
But
the
it's not in
governor,
place.
right? And just, I think it will be fine and won't have an issue,
Yes.
but they won't touch sentencing rates for pedophiles and sex offenders and stuff. So that's something that we're trying to like do on our own, but nobody legislative. I shouldn't say nobody, because Angelo Santa Barbara does have something that he's trying to put through related to that. But for the most part, they kind of are like, no, that's the governor has to do that. So if we can
Keep pushing
and then maybe annoy her
not
enough.
afraid
I
to
don't
hear
know.
no.
No,
Right?
I love
Exactly.
it. I love it. Mama bear.
That's right. I'm not afraid.
Well, because
hear
it will
no.
happen to someone else's child. Like it's inevitable, and it's he's away in prison now, but there's another one around the corner. Like these people really are everywhere, and I think that was a big wake up call for people that they knew us, like in the community and whatever, and it was like, oh, I know this person. I know. Somebody that this happened to. Yeah, so it's like, it was a big wake-up call. Like, this people all of a sudden were putting air tags on their kids and coming up to me and telling me they were putting an air tag on their child at, the Great Escape or whatever. Yeah, it was like, it really impacted people. So I think that was kind of good in a way, too, to bring awareness that this is fairly rare, but it can happen to you and your family.
Yeah. Well, thanks, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Trisha,
Yeah.
Janae, thank you very much. And thank you for listening to the Upbeat podcast from Kelly's Angels. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and send us a comment and suggestions for future episodes of The Upbeat from Kelly's Angels. I'm Mark Mulholland. Until next time, stay on The Upbeat.
If you enjoy The Upbeat, please subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have topics you'd like us to cover on The Upbeat, please send your ideas to theupbeatpod@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. On behalf of the volunteer board of Kelly's Angels and the families we help who are facing life-threatening conditions, thank you for listening to The Upbeat.
Nice job, McKenna Rose.
Thanks, Dad. You too.